This is day 2 of the Wholecloth Patterns Wholecloth Project Bag Sew-Along. You'll need a copy of the sewing pattern to follow along. You can get that by following the links below. Today we will talk about printing and assembling your PDF pattern. We'll go over the advantages of tracing that pattern, and I'm going to demonstrate how to draw your own pattern pieces based on the chart and diagram included in the pattern instructions. Finally, we're going to cut the fabric. Let's get started. We'll start by assembling the PDF pattern. You can print the whole pattern on your home printer, and you want to print at 100% scale, not scaled to fit. You can tell if you printed it correctly by measuring the square on the top of the first pattern sheet, and if that measures 1 inch, then you've done it correctly. There's a diagram in the pattern instructions that shows you what the assembled PDF pattern will look like when it's all put together. So you can use that diagram, and you see each sheet has a big gray number on it telling you what order the sheets go in. So we're going to start with sheets 1 and 2, and you want to align their shared border and match up the triangles. To do that, you have to cut off one of these borders. It doesn't matter which one. I usually work from left to right. So once you've cut off the border, then we're going to just tape them together. You could also use glue stick. So there we've assembled sheets 1 and 2, and we're just going to continue with the rest of the pattern sheets from left to right until we get to the end of the row. When I've reached the end of the first row, I'm going to go back and start the first sheet in the second row. And for that one, the shared border is across the top. So I'm going to cut off that border and then match up the triangles. For the next sheet, I'm going to cut off 2 borders where this sheet meets the pattern and match up the triangles again. And I'm just going to continue cutting off 2 borders like we did on the last sheet until I get to the end of the second row. Now that the pattern is assembled, I usually trace the size that I want to make. You can see that the sizes are nested, so if you wanted to make a set of all 4 bags, you would have to print and assemble the pattern 4 times. To avoid that, I trace the pattern, I just use this architectural tracing paper. I think it's easy to work with, it's durable, and it's easy to pin through. So I'm just going to trace off the size medium because that's the size that I want to make today. So I've traced the outer cut line for the size that I want to make, and now I want to transfer all of the other pattern information. There are some notches on this pattern that are pretty important, so I want to make sure that I transfer those accurately. I'll transfer the grain line so I know how to position my pattern on the fabric when it's time to cut, and I'm going to label the pattern so in the future I remember what this is and the size. So now that I have traced the whole pattern, I can cut it out from the tracing paper. Here is your finished traced pattern piece. At this point, you could move on to cut your fabric, but I'm also going to show you another way to draw the pattern pieces. The pattern instructions include a chart and diagram with the information you need to draw your own pattern pieces. If you don't want to print and assemble a PDF, this is a great way to get the pattern pieces. So I'm going to use this architectural tracing paper again, just because I think it's easy to work with. I'm going to use the long straight edge of my paper as one of the long straight edges of my pattern. I'm going to use this ruler that has the perpendicular lines across it to set up a 90-degree angle along the top edge of my paper. So I'm going to align the top edge of my paper with one of these lines. Next, I'm going to use the chart in the pattern instructions to lay out the outer perimeter of the size of bag that I want to make. Now that I have the perimeter laid out for the size of bag that I want to make, I'm going to go back to the chart and the pattern instructions to lay out the notches. Now I'm going to draw a line parallel to one of the long edges of my pattern piece to indicate the grain line. And then I'm going to label my pattern piece so I can remember the size and what the pattern is next time I want to make it. Now we're ready to cut out the pattern piece. So you see now I have the drafted pattern piece and the traced pattern piece. Next, let's cut the fabric. Today we're going to use this Robert Kaufman Essex linen. This print is from the Anagram Riverbend collection. And the first thing we'll do is align the grain line of our pattern piece with the grain line of the fabric. This is a pretty stable fabric, so the grain line is generally perpendicular to the selvage edge. But if you were using a less stable fabric or something that got a little warped, you can find the grain by pulling on the fabric. If it doesn't have any give, then you are pulling parallel to the lines of thread that go across the fabric. If you pull it a little off, it will stretch. So you can get an idea of where your grain is that way if you can't see the individual threads going across the short direction of your fabric. Sometimes with the Wholecloth Project Bag, I like to cut it out perpendicular to the grain, either because it's a better use of the fabric, or if it's a striped fabric where the stripes run the length of the fabric, I like them to run the length of the pattern piece too, just because I like the way it looks with the finished bag. So now I'm going to line up my pattern piece and pin. Now that the fabric is completely pinned, I'm ready to cut. Next, we'll mark our notches. I like to make a single snip when I mark my notches. I think less is more. That way, they don't interfere when you're sewing. Now we're all set to sew, and you can find that in the next video.